Hello and welcome to Newsmax Now. I'm John Bachman. We begin tonight with the Inspector General's report on former FBI Director James Comey and his handling of then presidential candidate Hillary Clinton's email server ahead of the 2016 election. The 548-page report says Comey deviated from the FBI and Justice Department's procedures during the investigation, damaging the law enforcement agency's image of impartiality. Quote, while we did not find that these decisions were the result of political bias on Comey's part, we nevertheless concluded that by departing so clearly and dramatically from FBI department norms, the decision negatively impacted the perception of the FBI and the department as fair administrators of are reasonable, even though I disagree with some of them. People of good faith can see the unprecedented situation differently. I pray no director faces it again. Thanks to IG's people for hard work. But now, 3 members of the House Judiciary Committee say the report may have been compromised. Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs, Florida Congressman Ron DeSantis, and Matt Gaetz all sent a letter to the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, saying that a draft of the rebuttal and response. We request you support Klayman, and the rest of our panel will be here very shortly. All right, Larry, let's start with you. Your biggest takeaway from this report: a lot of people are pointing to the fact that James Comey broke from FBI and DOJ procedures. Where do we go from here?
John, where we go in terms of this report is nowhere. I was just watching the press conference of the FBI Director Christopher Wray. His idea of punishment is to refer this to the Office of Professional Responsibility of the Justice Department. Where there, it will stay buried until everything goes over. No one will be held accountable. I predicted this from the start. This is a whitewash. It's a cover-up. It's the DOJ, through its Inspector General, protecting itself. It's absolutely disgraceful. But it was so predictable. The president needs to appoint a special counsel himself. He has that authority. He's the head of the executive branch, and he can order it tomorrow, and I hope that he does. Second thing he needs to do, he needs to fire Rod Rosenstein. Rosenstein has threatened congressional staffers. What he did was illegal, to try to coerce them, to obstruct justice. If anybody's obstructed justice, it's Rosenstein. And he needs to really lay the law down for Jeff Sessions that he's got to start getting involved and not put his head in the sand. But this is a tough report for the president, because anything he does, he's going to be criticized for, because this report was a whitewash. It left Comey off the hook. That's why he's so happy. And it let everybody else off the hook, despite the fact that there were emails that came out that showed that Strzok and Page, the 2 lovebirds, wanted to stop the president from becoming president. So this is a disgrace, John, in terms of what's been going on. But it's been going on a long time in Washington, D.C. This is the deep state. This is the elite. It protects itself. Democrats and Republicans generally, few exceptions, basically just scratch their own backs.
All right, joining us also Lindsey France and Ned Ryan. Guys, thanks for being with us. We just read this an excerpt from this letter that was written by Ron DeSantis, Matt Gaetz, and another congressman from Arizona. And Ned, first to you, do you agree with them that this report may have been compromised because it was circulated within the FBI and the DOJ before it was actually released?
Well, we're going to have to see what results from this letter and what we can actually find out. Again, I'm calling for as much transparency and accountability as possible. So, you know, if they can't get the original draft, I would hope that Trump, as the head of the executive branch, would make that possible. I will say this, was hoping for a little bit more of the IG report, but I do think it did clarify a few things. First of all, Comey is probably one of the worst FBI directors in its history, probably, you know, tied for that with J. Edgar Hoover. The thing that kind of struck me a little bit, John, was the dissonance in which, you know, he's saying Comey, no political bias, and yet we saw examples of bias all over the place. When you give Hillary Clinton preferential treatment on how you actually how you addressed the entire private email server, and we know for a fact that it was actually hacked by a foreign power and that there were classified information that was accessed through that. Right. Any one of us would have done that, we'd be sitting in Leavenworth at this moment. And then in regards to the other bias, how can you not say when Lisa Page emails Peter Strzok, you know, please, he's not going to be president, right? And he emails back and says, we're going to stop it. And then you have another lawyer that was on Mueller's team signing off saying, "Viva la resistance." So I saw bias everywhere in this investigation. I think the bigger question, John, is this. Are we actually going to get to the point where we can trust the DOJ and the FBI to once again be even-handed in how it's handing out justice? And if we don't see some real reform taking place inside those two buildings, I got real questions moving forward about how we actually believe in the rule of law.
Yeah, we're certainly going to talk about that in more detail. We were just listening to Christopher Wray promising that there would be reform within the FBI. We'll get to that in just a second. Lindsay, I want to talk about this a little bit. Hillary Clinton's former campaign chairman, John Podesta, told The Hill that there is good evidence that Comey's actions in the final days leading up to the 2016 election blew the election for Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. Take a listen.
He violated department policy. He refused to take the advice of senior people in the Justice Department. So I'm not going to defend him. We lost by 70,000 votes over 3 states, won the popular vote by 3 million votes. I don't think it's impossible to say which thing caused us to lose those 70,000 votes or to tip the election to Donald Trump. But I think this was in fact a significant factor.
This was a similar talking point circulated from a lot of Democrats. Lindsay, what do you think about Podesta's response to the release of this report?
First thing that stands out to me is that he said himself, it's impossible to know what swung the election. This is a campaign that from the beginning, in Hillary Clinton's book, What Went Wrong? Well, the answer's on the front of the book. Hillary Clinton went wrong. So when they're talking about blame and they want to blame foreign governments and propaganda and Facebook and Twitter and the emails and James Comey, will pick something. And the truth of the matter is Hillary Clinton lost an election that could have easily gone to her. So I don't think that Comey's, saying that there's more investigative action being taken on these emails didn't hurt her. I certainly do believe that. I don't necessarily think that swung it for Trump. I think there were a lot of people who just didn't go vote for Hillary, maybe a write-in, or they just didn't vote. But when he says there's no way to know, and when we're listening to a campaign say over and over and over again, it was this reason or 5, it just contradicts over and over and over, and the American people are tired of it.
But John, that begs the issue, really, if I may say. Hillary Clinton should have been indicted. She was lucky that all she got was James Comey coming out and grandstanding and being insubordinate, okay? Many people are insubordinate. So this finding that that's the result of all this investigation shows that this investigation was a sham. Hillary Clinton deserved to be indicted. And if that happened, that's all she wrote. It wouldn't even have been a close election.
Well, to further what Larry just said, John, the only reason that there might have been any impact with 10 days to go is because of James Comey's, I would argue, illegal and lawless exoneration of Hillary Clinton in July of 2016. Because, again, any one of us would have done what she did, and Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills, we'd be sitting in prison. And so I would argue that the only reason there might have been any impact because he made the wrong decision back in July. So I don't buy any Podesta, and I would further what Lindsay said. In that summer, let's not forget, in 2016, there was a poll that showed nearly 70% of the American people did not find Hillary Clinton trustworthy. There are a lot of factors, and they want to blame everything else. And again, I say Hillary Clinton's been on the it's not me, it's you tour to lay the blame at everybody else's feet. She should look in the mirror and look at herself and blame herself.
Well, I'm sure we'll hear more about this as that tour continues. Let's drill down a little bit more on these text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page about Trump's chance of getting elected. You mentioned this, Ned, but I want to get into a little bit more. During the exchange, again, Page texted Strzok, "Trump is not ever going to become president, right? Right?" with exclamation point. To which Strzok replied, "No, he won't. We'll stop it." The report specifically talked about that and said, quote, "We did not find documentary or testimonial evidence that improper considerations, including political bias, directly affected the specific investigative actions we reviewed." Now, what's interesting is that Strzok was also involved intimately on the Russia investigation. How much does these new text messages taint that investigation, Larry?
Well, first of all, this reminds me of the 3 monkeys. Hear no evil, see no evil, do no evil. It's right in front of them. They don't want to recognize it. But yes, there was a taint. Now, how can you say otherwise? It's so absurd. It's like an existential novel written by Ionesco or somebody like that, that you can't believe what's being said. So the American people are not going to buy this, and we need a special counsel. As you know, John, I volunteered or get somebody else But this needs to be properly investigated. And it's a lot like, police brutality. When some police are let off the hook on a state level, then the federal government steps in and does a civil rights investigation. The president needs to step in now and do his job. Now, we have citizens' grand juries at Freedom Watch, but the president needs to exercise control right now. He's been undercut by his own FBI and by the Inspector General.
We'll see what happens. Horowitz is going to be testifying next week before Congress. It should be a hot seat for him. I want to move on and talk a little more about another big story today. New York Attorney General Barbara Underwood filing a lawsuit against President Trump, the Donald J. Trump Foundation, and his children, Don Jr., Ivanka, and Eric, this morning. The suit seeks to disclose the Trump Foundation, or dissolve the Trump Foundation, rather, citing illegal conduct. After a 2-year investigation, Underwood says the foundation engaged in extensive unlawful political coordination with Trump's 2016 presidential campaign, and it conducted repeated and willful self-dealing to benefit the personal interests, his personal business interest. Also, Underwood's claims that the foundation violated basic legal obligations for nonprofits. Now, the New York Attorney General's office has since sent referrals to the Federal Elections Commission and the IRS, arguing that the Trump Foundation may have committed these violations of federal tax and election laws that warrant further investigation. Larry, this is a civil lawsuit, not a criminal case. Talk to us about the importance of the distinction between the two.
Well, civil can go criminal. And it's clear that the Attorney General is out to get the president. He wants to humiliate him. He wants to embarrass him. New York's a very, very leftist state. Anything could happen. I mean, it's a judge-tried case or a jury-tried case, either one. And this is an attempt to separate the president from his own foundation. It's an attempt to embarrass him. And regrettably, this is what you see in New York. You see it in California, too. The two coasts are very, very leftist and very partisan. This was a political hatchet job coming out on the same day as the IG report, on the same day as the president's birthday. Right. It was to stick it to him. Mm-hmm. It was personal. And that's the way it was with the former Attorney General Schneiderman. So, this is to be expected in the state of New York. It's a disgrace.
All right, we got to run to a commercial break. Ned and Lindsay are coming back. Larry, we got to say goodbye. Thanks for coming on today. Great to get your legal insight. We'll see you back here real soon.
Take care.
All right, when we come back, find out what the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., had to say about the IG's report and the possibility of his father getting the Nobel Peace Prize. Stay tuned.